Apple Knocker Radio.
Greetings, friends. My next guest is bodybuilder and spiritual teacher Jason Gallant. I discovered Jason Gallant back when the pandemic lockdowns were beginning, and like everyone else, I was going through a lot of emotions, with none of those emotions being good ones. And so I knew right away that I had to set my mind on some kind of positive goals. Something just told me right from the beginning that thing was not gonna go away as quickly as they were saying. I had misgivings or bad vibes, bad mojo. So I decided I'm going to set my mind on some positive goals, or else I could get sucked into the negativity. And among those things was that there were a couple of new spiritual practices that I wanted to take on. I just wanted to practice a couple things and master them. And so there were a bunch of things, a bunch of meditations and stuff like that I tried. Two of them I continue to use to this day regularly. One of them was the Jesus prayer, which is an Eastern Orthodox prayer. The other one is the Ganesh mantra, which is a Hindu mantra. And I actually do not recall exactly what set me looking for the Ganesh mantra. But what I do recall is the video that I found that I decided to use to learn the Ganesh mantra and to master the Ganesh mantra. And what I mean by master, it's not like overly complicated, but it's a Hindu mantra. And so I wanted to make sure that I was getting, the intonations and each syllable right, And so the video that I found was Jason Gallant, who is my next guest. And so multiple times a day for a couple weeks, might have been up to a month, I don't know. I would do the Ganesh mantra with Jason. Oh, and also the other benefit is there's a specific number of times you're supposed to do the mantra. And so it was good to do it with Jason on the recording, because then I didn't have to count them. It was only later that I learned the best way to go about that is to get some prayer beads. You could find prayer beads that are specifically for the Ganesh mantra. But so Jason was somebody who was very ingrained in my psyche, right? And so I always wanted to talk to him, and with this, I got the chance to, and it was really cool. Jason turned out to be way beyond even what I expected. His sincerity and his authenticity are absolutely inspiring to me. The guy is the real deal, and the conversation went beyond anything I could have hoped for. I think it's fascinating. He shares some truly useful and actionable insights and ideas, and I think everybody who watches this is going to get something useful out of it, even if it's just some brain candy to chew on for a while, or some insights into your own practices and what it means to be this. What is this enlightenment thing, right? And so, yeah, it turned out even better than I could have hoped. Jason's the real deal, and I really enjoyed the conversation with him, and I'm looking forward to sharing it with you all. And I'm going to stop now, because I'm just going to keep yammering. Nobody wants to listen to me yammer. So here is the interview with Jason Gallant. Thank you very much, everybody. Could you just tell your story about, because you started out natural bodybuilder, you had some prominence in the field, you're on magazine covers and stuff like that, and then you took a diversion, you changed your life path. Could you just briefly summarize that?
Okay, Jeff. Yeah, no, what I'll do is one thing, I think we all come with certain gifts in life. We all have certain positives and negatives. Like I knew guys in my elementary school, you could see they were just A students, spend 20 minutes doing their homework, and they were free to watch all the TV shows or to go play hide and seek or whatever the hell it was. And that would continue all the way through high school. And some of those guys ended up becoming engineers, doctors, all these guys that I knew. I wasn't one of those guys that was gifted in that intellectual department. Not that I wasn't handicapped by any means, but at the same time, I noticed that did not come as easy to me. And I could make the honor roll, and I could do well with that. But my fixation was almost like as a warrior of some sort. So I was always, the Van Damme films and the First Blood and Rocky and all, that stuff was that was where my passion was going, in the physicality, into, I guess I had a supreme attachment to some sort of warrior sort of past life or something, who knows what it was. And so when I started getting bullied, or, beat up or dragged across lunch tables in high school and stuff like that, then I started to develop the plan to deal with this war of life that was my teenage years, and I had a twin brother too. So what made it worse is, imagine if you're in the army and you're trying to snipe from a hill, but there's another guy there, so you're twice the size, so there's more targets, you know what I mean? So I couldn't hide. Right in high school, social life, it was like there's two of us, and they're like, hey, there he is. Oh, there he is again. Let's go. Right? It's like, because you're kind of like some sort of weird mutant that wanders around the high school when you're an identical twin, right?
Right.
So anyway, that's what started my weight training. And without getting too lost in that whole thing, I started lifting weights, and I was in martial arts. And so everything was about war and combat and stuff, and becoming the best I could at that to overcome the adversity that was in my life at that time. But of course, once you become a young adult and you get in a few bar fights and things start happening, you start to realize that, okay, this war path is not necessarily, a good way of being, right? I mean, there's a time for war, but it's not a good way of life as far as let's just find another war to fight all the time.
Right.
So I started to realize I was fighting with myself somehow. And as I started to channel then my weight training and everything from battle more into a career as far as competing, I started to become very prominent in the world. And that I was actually semi-famous in natural bodybuilding. I was like one of the most famous people in natural bodybuilding. Like I was sought after by photographers and stuff. I go down to the States and stuff. And I realized there was something missing in that life when I was down there. I could see that when I was in LA at the time that, you could be, as my dad would say, dead in a pile. He has these weird Eastern sayings, right? Dead in a pile, right? Like you could be just alone somewhere on the street and nobody would give a crap about you. Like I realized there was something missing in that whole LA life. And I also noticed that as a drug-free bodybuilder, because that whole fitness industry is riddled with drugs and stuff, and I was in the drug-free natural side of things, it was very difficult to make any sort of living just being a natural person trying to be healthy. It was almost like it was this facade, that was going on. And somewhere along the lines, after struggling to make a living, trying to make it in that world, I started just to settle down and personal train. I got into sales for a period of time and everything, but I realized there was something in my life that was missing. Like every day at that time, I'd have people come up to me in the gym, or at least, one or two, and say, wow, I wish I looked like you, because I was at my elite results and stuff. But I remember I looked in the mirror one day and I actually said, because I was so miserable, because I was like, where do I fit in this world? What's going on? Something about me is not fitting in the normal 9-to-5 thing, the normal, get a wife, have kids and settle down, and a dog and a picket fence. Like that, all that stuff was not pleasurable to me. Literally, somebody could have dropped off a Ferrari in my front yard, said, Jason, here's the keys. It's yours. I'd be like, there was some kind of lifelessness. It's almost like a dangling piece of fruit, but it's been there for so long that it's just rotten on the branch. It's just ready to drop. That's what I felt like. There was something that was like tasteless in life. There was something missing. And when I said that to myself in the mirror, what happened was about 6 months later, I was playing hockey and I got I dislocated my shoulder. So basically it was a really serious dislocation, gone to emergency and everything. And that last thing that I was successful at, the bodybuilding thing, because everything else I was not the most successful at, but the last thing that got taken away from me. Mm-hmm. And that's when I started to look inwards and say, okay, what is the secret to life? What is this whole thing about? Now this thing that I was really good at is taken away from me. Now what, right? So it was like the last little thread I had to cut between me and my attachment to the physical before I started to look to the eternal self. So I started to look at Qigong masters. I started to read books on shamanism, and all of it was very confusing because you'd read these books and they just talk about experiences they had. And so then you start to get entrained into this thing that I'm supposed to have certain experiences. And then you realize I'm not having those experiences. There's something wrong with me. What the hell, right? So it was almost like causing a problem in some way. And so I started to try certain exercises like meditation, and I'd be like, oh, close my eyes. I'm good. I see black. Big fucking deal. You know what I mean? like, what's the big deal of this? What the hell? This is stupid, right? So like this shit doesn't work. You know what I mean? So I started to have that sort of tug of war because I wasn't taught the proper context of what is enlightenment and what is meditation, what is this stuff. So I was searching of what that all meant. But the truth is that the journey itself will produce the teacher. Once you're actually journeying, your yearning in your heart for truth will attract circumstances for truth. And at some point, I started to see this energetic healer. At least that's what I thought she was at the time. It turns out she was an actual very powerful spiritual guru known as Aratima. And I was getting these people talking to me that say, hey, there's this woman, you should really go see her if you're interested in the spiritual stuff. She's like quite different than some sort of hedge witch or psychic, right? Because my experience with psychics where all they did was give you, here's all your fucking problems, but I don't know what you're going to do about it.
Right.
and most of the time they weren't even correct about the problems, So I found that stuff was not the path that I was looking for. There was something deeper. And when I went to see her for the first time, I had an experience of oneness with a person. And it was something, you know how abstract these spiritual experiences are. They're so difficult to explain. But it was an experience that I had never had before. Just by laying on the table and her doing a little bit of energetic healing, I felt like I was one with this person, and had nothing to do with emotions. It had nothing to do with like some sort of fascination with another human being. It just had to do with a experience that changed the paradigm through which I was experiencing life. And I was like, what the hell is that? And where's that been most of my life, right? So I started to, long story short, I mean, there was a lot of back and forth, but long story short, I started to see her for sessions regularly just for energetic healing. And then she started to initiate me into certain things. And one thing she initiated me into was a Saraswati mantra. And the Saraswati mantra is the Sanskrit mantra for the goddess energy of knowledge. So she is also the governor of mantra itself. Saraswati is like she is the energy of voice, and vach, which is spiritual speech or speech that is based in truth, right? So a year later, a year passed, and I basically got sidetracked with life for a bit, and I didn't see the energetic healer for a while. I didn't see Aratma for a while. And what happened was, through some sort of series of weird events, a whole booklet and information of Sanskrit mantra and what it's about appeared to me. My brother just dropped it off on my bed and said, Jason, you should take a look at this stuff. It's really interesting. I said, take that shit, shove it up here. You know what I mean? Because I was kind of stubborn at that point, I would only take things through certain corridors, you know what I mean? Like, but if it was from my brother, that's it. It's bullshit. I wasn't taking it, So the brother rivalry. Well, anyway, he said, no, I spent $100 on this. Like, seriously, just look at this for a second. I think you're gonna get something out of it. And in that, the teachings that were in this book and CDs and stuff, they talked about the power of sound and how everything is vibration. And we know that with quantum physics, everything's vibration. The difference between a liquid and a solid is largely vibration and the space between the molecules and stuff. And it started to talk about, in the beginning was the word, let there be light, then there was light. So the word and the vibration is what created the light. It wasn't the light itself that came first. And in the whole spirituality and stuff, we have this fascination with light. But vibration is the source of where the light came from. So once I started to see that this is actually a science, it's nothing about religion. It's about, there are some people that just sat here for a long time, and as they just were here, they became hyper focused on reality, and certain sounds became apparent to them. And that's where the basis of Buddhism and Hinduism and some shamanism, and also the Sufis of the Islam tradition, like, this is where they learn this stuff. It wasn't through a religion where they made up a bunch of words. It was like they had realized something, just like I realized leaves on the tree just by watching the tree. And I started to just experiment, kind of like I did with lifting weights. It's like, oh, this is how you get bigger muscles. Okay, all right, I'll just do the exercises and see what happens, right? And so I thought, okay, let's just start chanting this mantra. I started using a Lakshmi mantra, which is a mantra for abundance, because that was one of my biggest things in life, was that I was always struggling with money all the time. And so what happened was, Lakshmi has to do with abundance in all forms, and love being the most important, and connection, right? And what happened was, I was living in a town that was about 45 minutes away from the healer that I had been previously seeing, known as Aratima. Well, then what happened, I started chanting this mantra. Within 2 weeks, all of a sudden Aratima appeared in the same town as me, so I no longer had to commute. And that was my major excuse of why I'd stopped seeing her. I didn't want to drive a whole hour and whatever, and I don't have the money, whatever. Well, she showed up in somebody's basement just doing sessions, because there were so many clients in this town that were interested in what she was doing. And somebody just said, hey, Jason, you know what? Remember, you weren't seeing Aratima anymore? Maybe you should go back to see her. She's actually just local now. So I said, okay, well, I guess it's just too damn convenient, and I'm going to take this as a sign. So I started seeing her some more. And successively, there was these many strange experiences that I couldn't explain that were life-changing. Like, she initiated me into the Ruparam Jyoti mantra. Now, this mantra is the light mantra that was realized by a guy named Swami Ramalingam, who turned his body into light. When she initiated me with that mantra, I walked around on a cloud for 2 weeks, and it was like I was on drugs. I was like, everything feels so pleasant. What the hell is going on? And my girlfriend at the time was looking at me. She goes, what's wrong with you? You know, because she was used to me being more of a fiery, irritated kind of guy, but also I was like just mellowed right out. She's like, did you just come out of the psych asylum or what the hell do you right? I remember sitting at sushi, just eating. She goes, this is so weird. You're so weird right now. What's wrong? So as I started getting happier, she started getting more irritated, right? She's like, you know, I'm used to that irritated guy. I want that guy to be around, right? So anyway, a lot of crazy experiences started happening, which showed that there was a science of experience. You know, and I started to get attached to these experiences, like most spiritual students, right? They start, oh, I like that experience. I want that again. I want that. I want another one of those, right? And what happened was the experiences would always change. It was almost like whack-a-mole, right? Where it's like you want this one over here, then the mole pops up over here, and it's different stuff, right? So you could never really get a template of, oh, spirituality is this experience. Oh no, it's this experience, it's that experience. And finally, at the end of this period of time, where at Atim and I, it became very apparent that I was more like a disciple than an actual client. And I was like, okay, I finally understood. I started researching gurus in India and just different stuff, and you know, and bhakti is the devotion path and stuff. And her and I finally became a couple. But it was like almost like a modern day ashram, where this gave me a way to be able to keep studying with her, but on a 24/7 sort of like Rocky Balboa path. You know what I mean? Where you're with coach all the time. You know, like here you are, drink the raw eggs and stuff. And so there was other things that were revealed to me once I became this spiritual student teacher thing became part of my daily pattern. Because when shit gets personal, that's when the real work starts. And a lot of times people like to be butterflies and just stop on the flower and then leave. Oh, nice scent of the flower, then leave. That's most of their spiritual path, right? But they're not willing to get consumed by the frog and then be transformed into, you know, frog poop and then maybe something else from that. That's really more the spiritual journey. And that's what became apparent to me. And one day through this process, and I talk about cleansing on my channel, about what spiritual cleansing is and stuff, and all these different emotions and these feelings that I thought were me. These are my feelings. These are my thoughts. These are my points of view. This is who I am. All that stuff just started getting discarded. And then one day it all imploded and I went, poof. And it was like the Matrix, where when the Neo takes the red pill and all of a sudden the mirror goes like this, all of reality just went, and then I went bang, and I just expanded right into everything. And it never left since. It was like I turned inside out, and now I'm more outside than I am inside. There's not this hard shell known as Jason, like, you know, like the candy coating of the Reese's Pieces or whatever, you know, where there's this hard shell of I, and then everything opposite is I. It's like, no, there was this collective agreement of I, which was a much different thing that emerged. And from that, another process or another journey began. But that is when I realized that, oh, spirituality wasn't about the experiences, although they can happen. It was about who is experiencing it, about the dissolution of that, so that the true one can become a part of this experience known as incarnation.
So when you talk about that concept, that there's a you, I mean, you're still there, you're Jason, I'm talking to you, you're still a person there, and you have some concept of your own like individuality, but it's not the same like usual ego identification. It's, I guess maybe it's just an impossible question to answer unless you experience it. But I'm trying to understand, like, how does one function if you can't think of yourself as a self-contained entity?
Well, you know, some people that are like incredibly, I don't know if narcissistic is the right word, but incredibly egotistical.
Yes.
And they talk about themselves in the third person all the time.
It's like that.
Well, you know, like, no, it's like that's how the mind of the ego works. It's like, look at me, I'm okay. This guy doing this, I'm Jason doing that, I'm Jason doing this, and look at Jason doing this, and Jason's a good boy today, and Jason's a bad guy, and Jason's, you know, this continues to happen. And that's basically what's happening in a person's mind, where they're self-reflecting constantly thoughts about their identification and building a story that's based on history and everything around it, right?
Right.
But it's not necessary to think of yourself in order to be yourself. And that's what people mix up. when they're in their mind, an overactive mind will always think about themselves in order to be themselves. But if your thoughts stop happening in this moment, you still survive. You're still alive. You're still who you are. And you naturally have all the facilities. You naturally have all the awareness. If anything, your awareness is even hyper-focused, right? Like, in sports or sniping or whatever it is you're doing, if you're right there in the moment, you're going to be much better than in your thoughts about, I wonder what my accountant did on my taxes today, and then you're doing thoughts distract you from reality. So once you're not thinking or having superfluous thoughts, and any thought that you have has to do with recognition of the environment and what's going on, there is an actual freedom of experience in that, along with a clarity. So that's why people went to the tops of the hills, the whole cartoon sort of thing, and the guru on the mountaintop and that sort of thing for wisdom. It's because clarity is a natural side effect when you use the mind properly, but you know that you're not the mind. It's like being a tool, right? Imagine somebody who is in the army and they believe that they are the gun instead of using the gun when it's necessary, right?
Right.
There's going to be a whole bunch of experiences that a person lives based on the gun's reality. But it's going to be very limited. A gun can do some things very well and a lot of things badly. And then if the gun gets jammed or something, oh, the tragedy of it all, I'm dying, like this disease I have as a gun, right? So it's about identification. When you realize that everything you need and everything that you are has always been here the whole time. It's just that you've put a lot of stuff over top of it that's restricted your experience of life. Then it's quite interesting, because who I am didn't disappear. Okay. Who I thought I was disappeared.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. Like when you're operating from that space, that core you, which is not the same as the ego you, which accreted around the real you, but you still, like a person operating from that space still has preferences and certain things that if you take two people that are operating from their core identity, one's still going to like different kinds of food than the other. Is that correct?
There's going to be, now we're going to be talking about grounding, illumination. So it's good to not, I'll talk about it just for the purpose of conversation, but it's good to not tell people what their experiences are going to be, because then that preconceived notion gets overlaid on top of things. And then they start to try to create that instead of just surrendering to the universe, telling them what the hell is the truth. Right.
Right.
But what I'm going to say is that there'll be preferences that you're born into. Like your physical body is radiating a certain amount of experiences. Like even right now, as you sit in that chair, you have a certain experience physically of sitting in that chair that will be different than, say, a woman named Jennifer from Croatia. I don't even know how Jennifer would be from Croatia, but whatever. But anyway, I'm just saying, right? So say that she would have a different feeling or experience. It's very subjective, not objective. And based on her constitution, based on her blood type, based on, who knows what other factors, right? History, injury history, all that stuff. And so once you realize that this experience you're having in this moment is negotiable, then you don't take the preferences as seriously, and you start to discard preferences that are no longer in alignment with a greater wisdom or a greater good, right? So say you I love pizza, right? Say you just said that to yourself, and I'm going to identify with that. I love pizza no matter what. And then you start to get extremely overweight. You start to have all these sort of issues. When you're clear and you are free from the mind, there's almost this buffer of experience that allows you to say, well, I don't need pizza so badly. But if pizza is your only source of pleasure in life, you're going to be holding on to that like a lifeline, like a drowning swimmer onto a lifeguard or onto a life vest, right? You're going to be like, oh, I have to have that pizza because everything else in my life or everything else in my experience is horrible. But when you're free, you start to actually bring this freedom into the physicality at some point, where you start to see where, okay, there's preferences, but is the preference serving me or not? If the preference is not serving me, I can actually let it go. And then that's where you become freer from the desires and fears on the physical level, right? Just like some people have emotions, right, that are stuck in the body where they'll perceive like cold water. Like I have one client, she's scared of water, right? So you go by water, she'll go in and stuff, but she's just having a panic attack. First, it was because she couldn't see the bottom. Next, it's because she could see the bottom, right? Because it's never rational, right? The fear is never rational. Once you start realizing that these are just trapped energies in your system that are kept in place from a story you tell yourself, first thing you do is drop the story. Then the emotional feeling will be there. and a physical feeling. And sometimes they're both together. And sometimes you're born into that. Sometimes it was just in the body right from the time you're born. It's not your fault it's there. But once you let go of the need to control it and realize there's no problem with having the sensation, then some of the process starts to take over, where you expand, and just like a grand ocean will naturally purify a bucket of dirty water. The same thing happens to you, because if once you expand, naturally a purification process takes place, and then the experience of that fear shifts. The experience of that water will shift. And that's what happens when you don't lock your point of view into seeing something from a certain point of view. If it's causing you suffering, that point of view can become malleable and change. And once a person is awake, not woke, let's be careful about that, but the enlightenment process, awake, like to who they truly are, their mind and point of view becomes more malleable. They're not so invested into holding on to point of view, because they realize, I'm not going to die if I let go of my point of view. Where a lot of people in the world right now, you can see like their point of view is their life. Like if I lose my point of view, it's almost like you're killing me because you're changing my point of view. My God, like I'm going to die from point of view, poisoning or something.
Right.
So the point of view is ego. The point of view through thought, right? Idealism. A fanatical person will always have a very strong point of view, right? But once freedom comes, then your point of view has to do with just what works, what is in alignment with reality based on your own conditions and based on what's not working. And you're very susceptible to letting go of something if it's no longer working for you. And that includes point of view or some sort of way of perception that's creating suffering, or some sort of dissonance in your physicality or in your emotions or in your mind.
I remember. So when we talk about the idea that of like you said, malleability, I have certain preferences, got to let them go if it's not my right path. What about circumstances where, say somebody's in an abusive relationship, or say somebody is in a totalitarian government or something? I would say that just like that preference is justified, that you want to get out of the abusive relationship, or you want to get out from under this tyrannical rule, right?
And that's the challenge of the spiritual path, is because people start to say, oh, all my preferences are wrong.
Exactly, man.
Yeah. I'm saying the self-induced preferences that are just creating suffering,
all right.
That's wrong. But sometimes your preferences are just in alignment with survival and truth, right? Let's just say this, there are immortal or universal preferences that run through you. And then there are mind preferences. This is about letting go of the mind preferences, but there's going to be some preferences of saying, this is for nothing more than just destruction or separation. And this is in alignment with a greater truth of the universe itself, of how the entire universe runs, right? And sometimes that is a warrior path. Sometimes you could be a person on a battlefield and be more spiritual than any person that's sitting in some sort of monastery. You could have a greater connection to the divine from being a real warrior than you could from being a pacifist, because that person could be identified with being a pacifist. And if you go into nature any day of the week, you're going to see life and death happen based on the law and the cycle of nature and life and death. That's part of it. So that's where religion becomes very confusing. Religion is basically, the way I look at it, is a great place to house spiritual exercises. But once the dogma and the cultural sort of idealism start to integrate in that, then it starts to become confusing, because now they start to throw in some poison words of, oh, here's what you should be and what you shouldn't be, instead of what you naturally are, because there's a whole other political dynamic that goes on there, right? But in the end, that was the most confusing part of the path of integration. And sometimes I found when I had outright war with people, because there was some truth-o-meter in me that realized, okay, this has to happen. And what this person's doing is in direct opposition to this grand happening within me that had nothing to do with mind. It had to do with some dissonance inside me, some dissonance I was feeling that was being falsely created. Until I finally had the conversation, the hard conversation, or the hard argument, or the hard conflict, that noise just kept on continuing. And so I had to create a separation from the person's ego, and then a greater love would burst through, and all of a sudden a freedom. It's like, and then there would be this energetic space that was cleared. And then in the end, that person was freer of their own pattern. But they were basically showing me their pattern and then working it out on me. And then I had to basically put a hard line on the sand. Like I had somebody attack me for not being a vegetarian, right? I said, listen, it doesn't work for me, right? They're like, oh no, you're a bad person because you're not a vegetarian. I'm like, really? I know somebody that would have died if they were a vegetarian because they had heavy bleeding, fibroids when they're in their 50s after menopause. And the normal supplements of iron and stuff did not work. It was not topping up their iron. They had to have 2 blood transfusions. And only once they started eating liver did they start topping up their iron levels and stuff. And so without getting into a deep discussion of that, the bottom line is that there's the law of life, and that takes precedent, and it goes way beyond anybody's idealism of whether you should be this or that. And so I know that there's this one guy, he sent me this long email, just, ripping me apart, just using the worst, most destructive words as you could say. And I was like, sorry, it doesn't work for me. This is my body just needs certain things. I didn't make my body, somebody else did, and this is it. So 6 months later, I get an email from him and saying, oh, you know what? I'm so sorry. And this is to this guy's credit. Like, what a great person to be able to do this and actually go out of his way and send me an email. He says, I'm sorry. I actually was doing the vegetarian thing. And you know what? All these different health problems started to manifest and my body was a wreck. Now, whether he was doing it right or wrong, who knows? But the fact that he just used this entire drama that we had as an excuse to let go of a fanatical point of view about something and say, who cares about the idealism? Let's just find out what works. Shows that he was willing to evolve in some way, shape, or form. But yeah, you're going to break everybody's idealism. The more in truth you are, you're going to break your own idealism. So guess what? You're going to break everybody else's too. I mean, there's no template you're going to be able to live, which is why if you read books on the great gurus and stuff, they were terribly frustrating to their students. They were not easy people to get along with. They weren't like all violins and harmony and stuff. One minute they were this, next minute they were that, next minute they were this. It was like life was constantly going through them. And it wasn't mental insanity because there was also this radiation of this bliss and this peace that was coming from them the whole time. So people are like, I feel like this divine experience, but at the same time, this person's personality is not acting like they're just a personality with A, B, and C options all the time, like the Terminator, right? Guy knocks on the door. Go away, you know what? A, no, F you, asshole, B, and C. You know what I mean? Come in, right. Right? So that's the ego. The ego has templates. And who you truly are is the water of life. It's like the Ganges, like the Ganges River in India, the Saraswati, she spits out the water out of Shiva's hair on top of his head. There's this flow of life. And where that flow goes, it isn't your decision. It's just the grand happening. Now, of course, this doesn't give you an excuse to go around abusing people or anything like that. But what I'm saying is because there's some people, this is the other thing that happens. There's some people that spiritually twist all concepts in order to get away with doing whatever they want. There's this chiropractor that actually is in this area, and him and I had some battles because I knew some mutual people that knew him. Anyway, he's in the news right now, and he's the relationship coach. But he got accused of beating his wife, and then he would use spiritual concepts like, oh, well, you're attracting this because it's all your karma and stuff, right? These are horrible ways of twisting these spiritual concepts, and they're absolutely false, right? So there is a greater harmony that comes when you come from truth. There may be small conflicts along the way, but what will happen is a greater harmony will be established. So the end goal is that there's this greater sort of law of life that takes precedent instead of people's mind idealisms just banging against each other. I hope that's clear. It's
dude, that's I can't tell you how much I appreciate that, because I've spent so much time reading these perspectives. Yeah. And some of them just logically didn't make sense to me. And it's because it becomes dogmatic, like you just insinuate. It gets to the point where seek love and peace and everything, but it becomes a dogma in itself until it doesn't make any sense anymore. And it's like you just said, I didn't ask to be born in a world where everything has to kill and eat something else. I didn't ask for that, man. Like this is the world I live in. And so, dude, honestly, I'm kind of, I almost wish we weren't doing this interview, as I would just go sit outside and contemplate what you just said, man. That's profound. And you really gave me a really valuable insight just now. I appreciate it.
It was the hardest lesson on the spiritual path for me to learn, was that I'm not going to be more liked by people by being in alignment with something that was unexplainable, right? What happened was the noise that people were unnecessarily living in and pushing upon everyone else became more obvious to me. And so naturally the truth of life would just trigger them. Where, like, you know, when something's really quiet, you could be whispering, but it seems like a yelling, right? Like you're outside and like say you're camping as a kid and you're outside in the yard and you're trying to whisper with your buddy and your parents are like, I hear you out there, shut the hell up, right? You know what I mean? Like you just whisper, what happened? So that's what happens with the noise that people carry. See, it's this stress, and then the stress drives, right? That drives the idealism and the questions, and then, oh, I have this feeling, so then everything should be this way. And they're constantly projecting some sort of, Hitlerish type of, idealism upon the world, thinking that somehow it'll lead them to freedom. But what they have to do is become free of the internal noise, like allow the flow. And then now the noise becomes a song, which we come back to mantra, right? It becomes like an om, right? And there's like a natural harmony and everything's in key at that point. But when things are out of key, every thought that comes from that, every idealism that comes from that, it's from something that's out of key. And so it's basically pushing everybody else out of key. It's kind of like somebody with a tuba in an orchestra, and they're smacking people on the head with their tuba everywhere they go because they have a feeling that I just need to express myself, right?
Right.
It just throws the whole song off. So suffering begets more suffering. And so at some point, somebody has to wake up and say, hey, listen, I'm going to find freedom within myself, at least from myself, and then see what comes from that. But in the beginning, a lot of times people get stuck on the spiritual path because they see some saint sitting in robes somewhere and they say, oh, I have to be that person. And if I'm not that person, then I'm not spiritual. It's like, no, this is a path of you being you, the deepest you, the deeper you, even before you think of the word I. And once that reality hits, you become aware of how the energy runs. You can feel things and experience things on a much deeper level, and you start to work with that flow. Right? I remember one time I was in a protein shake place. It was called Booster Juice, right? I was in this Booster Juice place. I was just getting a strawberry protein shake, and I was sitting there, and I felt great when I walked in, whatever, no problem. And all of a sudden, bang, my body started, I had an adrenaline rush all of a sudden. It was like almost like I was in the middle of a war or something. I'm like, what's going on? And also I got my Booster Juice, and I just walked out the front door, and I just started walking fast. And who I was with at the time, she's like, what are you doing? Where are you going? Like, what's going on? I'm like, I don't know. I just got to move, right? So I moved. Next day, I found out that the owner got murdered the night before.
Ooh.
Yeah. So like you start to be aware of forces, astrological forces, forces of nature, forces of intent and emotion. And this is why a lot of gurus are never in certain areas at certain times, because they're in alignment with something. They can't tell you why. They just say, oh, this energy just feels right over here. Kind of like a comfy couch. This just feels like better to sit on. And then the house collapses all around the couch, right? It's like that. So these are innate abilities that people have to be in the right place at the right time if they can trust who they truly are. But it takes quite an unraveling of this deposited noise that's been put in the body and in the heart and the emotions and the feelings. And only until one is willing to let go of all that to find a true perspective, which takes humility, right? Most people, you can say a lot of things to them, but then like, oh, that one thing, that's it. I don't believe you for a shit, right? And I was like, yeah, but this one point of view is actually causing you a lot of harm, right? You're actually feeling like garbage all the time because of holding on to this one point of view. And they'll still not want to let it go. So if they're at that stage, then they're not ready for the enlightenment path. They might be ready for the control path, but not the enlightenment path.
Yeah, man, you before we started recording the proper interview, when we were just chatting, and some of the other video or some of your other podcasts that I've listened to, you mentioned about how this awareness and this understanding, it's not really rational, right? Like you mentioned before we started the interview, you mentioned how you used to think that if you read enough books and you like understood it, then you would understand, but that wasn't really understanding in the way you're talking about it now. For somebody like me, and it sounds like somebody like you, I have thousands of books. That's who I am. I read, I want to understand things. And also like what you say right now, it inspires me, man. Like it like speaks to my heart. But immediately I start hearing my brain going, but how could you know? Like, how could those gurus know really? How is the universe really communicating? My point is, or my question is, how does one step into experiencing and feeling what you're talking about and not trying to logic their way through everything? Is there like a method for that, a practical method?
If this is my head, right?
Right.
And I experience everything like, hey, what's going on over there? What's going on over here? What's going on over here, right? This is the ego. You can see that there's going to be a dwindling of awareness, right? There's going to be, I'm going to be able to see less. The hearing's going to be muffled. If we just talk about five senses, we're not even talking about other senses that may be apparent, because the five senses take up the majority of your attention. A lot of times you're just always focused on those five senses. But once you pull yourself out of the ego, then you're more raw. You feel things more deeply. All of a sudden, things that were unbelievably impossible for you to feel become overwhelmingly painful in some way. So that's why once you wake up in some way, any layer of you that you discard, what happens? You become more sensitive. You start to feel stuff more, and then you have to hold a deeper level of center and allowing things to move through. So first thing you have to do is have enough humility, which I can sense in you. You already have it, right? I mean, when people face life and death, they naturally already have it a bit, because you realize the inevitability of you have to let go of it sometime. Like when you die, do you think that you're able to hold on to your idealisms then?
Right.
I believe I should live, right? Out you go, you know what I mean? So really, this is the path of inevitability. And once you surrender to the law of life and death, and the law of life and death within you, then what happens is a natural process starts to take place. So it's not about a control, it's about surrendering control. Right? It's about just letting go of your idealisms about who you think you are, all your limiting beliefs, even and then, these are the ideas as far as the stories, but then there's also the feelings inside you that you take seriously. Like there's certain feelings that are legitimate, that are coming from the true place, but there are certain feelings that just everywhere you go, I always say this, if everywhere you go, you have the same feeling, like say you're always irritated. Oh, that irritates me. This irritates me. Then you go into another environment, that irritates me. Chances are you're just carrying that irritation like a suitcase and just smacking every single scenario with it, right? So at that point, that is a good indicator that you can let go of taking that irritation so seriously and see what happens. So this is the thing. Feelings are not wrong, but feelings that are based on just almost like a rerun that's playing over and over in your body, in your mind, or in your emotional body, right? Your heart. What happens is that a lot of people think that they are those things when they're not. It's just energy that got stuck. Right? And once you allow that, just by sitting in meditation, mantra practice, breathing practice is very powerful. These are all practices you can do that naturally empower and strengthen this process to happen at a faster rate. What happens is there's this experience of freedom that is inherent inside you, and you notice that's the background through which all this stuff starts to happen. Now, once you switch to the power source as the background, this stuff just naturally becomes mobile, and you never take it seriously. It comes up, and you might even enjoy it for a bit. That effing guy, whatever, and then you're like, oh, okay, I'm done with that now. Time to let it go, and you just let it go, but you're not stuck in it. See, so that's really the best answer I can give it. I'm not sure if it was clear enough, because I understand we're talking about very ambiguous subjects, but the truth is you have to let go of the story that's reinforcing your suffering. So you have to be honest with yourself. Am I suffering in this moment? Is this a good experience? Is this a experience that's enriching my moment right now? Or is it just basically like self-abuse, right? And if I have an idea that's reinforcing that feeling, then I can let that go. Now, just so you know, you don't have to suffer in order to face atrocity in your life. A lot of people think that I need to feel this way inside in order to do the right thing about this atrocity that I've seen on the outside. The truth is that if you are free from suffering, and say you see a totalitarian regime, like you said in the beginning, say there's a totalitarian regime and you need to speak up about it or say something, right? You don't have to suffer inside in order to still express, right? Because you start to realize that clarity is the truth and freedom is the truth. And then you start to realize, well, that is the antithesis of freedom. And so freedom will naturally start to move. No matter where you go on this planet, air moves, right? Air is always in and out of my lungs every day, that annoying air, right? It moves everywhere. It's in all my orifices and cracks. You know what I'm saying? It just doesn't apologize. That's freedom, right? So freedom naturally moves. It's not something that is bound by suffering. You know, you don't need to suffer in order for air to express itself, right?
The Ganesh mantra will give you what you want, but that's in order to teach you that that's not really what you want, right? Like you were saying, like you can want the riches, but then once you get the riches, then you realize that's not what's going to make you happy, right?
Yeah, because the mantra practices or the certain spiritual practices that work with the ego, sometimes grace will hit where it almost like gives you something and gives you a wink at the same time, where it says, okay, here you go. This is what you wanted. Here you go. Now live that reality for a period of time and tell me if that is the total thing that you're looking for inside your soul. You know, is that the thing? And sometimes, not always, some people, they need to have some desires met in order for their ego to go further on their path. And other people, they need to be constantly stomped into oblivion. I mean, because if you give them one thing, they just run with it and it just goes off in a weird direction, right? They become like Golem in Lord of the Rings, off in a corner somewhere, you know, my precious, you know, the lifetimes are stuck there, right? So I believe, and I don't know for sure, but I believe it depends on where you're coming from. If people have that inner guru principle really active, like they're really sincerely seeking truth, they don't care what it is, they just want to know what is truth itself, what is the truth of who I am, what is the truth of all reality. Those people will be given what they need to be given in order to go further on their path. And it's not necessarily about what's easier, but they will be given what they need truly in order to go further on their path. And Ganesha is more the pleasant energy, where he's the beginning mantra for everybody. Ganesha is what they always chant before a puja ceremony in Hinduism. They chant it before they open up a business. They do anything that they're going to start, it's Ganesha. And Ganesha helps remove obstacles. He's the spouse of power. So he helps remove all the obstacles. So that way everything goes smoothly. If we look at it from a spiritual Kundalini point of view, which is Kundalini is the spiritual energy that runs through you, Ganesha helps remove blockages along the spine so you're not going nuts through the process, because we know that if you dissolve too quickly, your point of view, you know, it can cause a certain amount of insanity, right? So there is an actual gentleness that can happen in the path through the Ganesha energy that can allow you to integrate things as they shift, right? So if you're going to sell your house and move somewhere and I just drop a bomb on your house, that could be quite disconcerting and it can be more traumatic than anything, right?
Right.
So sometimes it's good to have them, okay, guess what? You're going to be moving in a couple of weeks. Okay, it's time to start packing, start to, you know, like it's nice to kind of have a little bit of a gentle sort of hand along the way. So that's the Ganesha energy. And that's why most gurus recommend you start with some sort of Ganesha mantra of some sort. And then from there, you can move into more advanced practices.
I think trust in the modern day is very hard for people to have. Nobody really trusts anybody anymore at this point. So do you have any advice for how somebody could find that path that they can find some trust in? How do they know what the path is for them to trust?
Well, one thing I talked about in that video is that trust is your natural state, meaning that every time you wake up in the morning, you trust that the air going in and out of your lungs is going to be air. You know, you trust that the water you're drinking is going to be water. You trust, you know, I see I predicted that. I didn't even know you're drinking one. Oh, look at me. Okay. Anyway, so thinking, there's a certain amount of trust that you put in certain things. And so what I mean, like, you don't have to trust anybody. I'm not speaking about you being the next victim of a con man or anything, but once you realize the reality that the trees trust that there's going to be water in the soil, and they just allow, there's no resistance, right? And when there's no resistance to the internal you, as far as emotions come up, you're not scared of them, you're not pushing them away. And if you are scared of them, then you're receiving the fear itself. It's like, okay, whatever, fear is normal too. It's all normal. That's a form of trust. And that allows a flow. When there's a lack of trust, what happens is that you block the flow of life inside you. And you are like a mystical machine. Like, you have all these little cog wheels and stuff. People call them chakras. And you have like over 72,000 meridians, like small pranic channels and stuff. Once you allow this process to happen, everything starts to take care of itself. So what I meant with that video was your internal a mechanism. So when people have a lack of trust religion as far as their point of view, they're holding on to the lack of trust point of view, right? If I'm holding on to I'm a saint point of view, that's another type of point of view. If I'm holding on to I need money all the time point of view, that's another point of view. You have to let go of all these points of view in order to let go of ego, and then a natural flow becomes empowered. And that flow takes care of things for you. And whether you trust or whether you don't trust, the same crap is going to happen. But the difference is that you'll actually enjoy your life, and you'll have an evolution of this internal experience if you allow trust to happen. There's everything that people are looking for is an elevated experience of this moment. That's all they're looking for. They've put conditions on it. They said, no, this must happen in order for my internal experience to change, or that must happen. But what happens if you give them this elevated experience automatically within? All of a sudden, you'll see all these goals and ideas that they had about what they should or shouldn't do. They just drop away. They're like, oh, I've already attained what I needed to attain. Now, maybe I'll play in life, but I'm not playing because I need to elevate my experience. It's just an expression of my freedom at that point. So the paradigm shifts. So what I would say, if people don't trust, if we're going to talk specifically with teachers and stuff, they would start doing experiments. Like I had some people when I was personal training that were incredibly overweight, right? And I'd say, okay, well, you have to do this diet, you have to do that, you have to do this. And they're like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that, right? So they would come up with whatever sort of idea they have to in order to avoid doing that. But in the end, they had to decide somebody was right in order to just try the path that they're on. And once they decided that, they could, really do the experiment and find out if it worked for them or not. But that took a certain form of trust, even if it was just a little bit, right? So you have to be willing to conduct your own experiments. And if you're not at that place yet, then you're just not suffering enough yet. Right? Yeah. Right. Like people always will do what they want to do, right? And like, oh, life sucks. Oh, okay. Why don't you go get a job? Oh, I don't want to do that. You know what I mean? Like it depends on where we're tied up. Will depend on how stubborn you are. And sometimes people that are extremely tied up in their ego but they're suffering, but not quite enough. They're like, no, I still think I'm right. I still want to be right, right? Because being right gives you a certain amount of pleasure, right? There's a tiny bit of pleasure in being right. That's what I found back in the day. That was the only pleasure I had left, was being right about something, right?
Right.
Then I realized, oh shit, I gotta let that go too. Fuck. and then this immense blessing would come through, right? I'd sometimes argue with my guru. I'd be like, no, that can't be right. That's not whatever. And she's like, no, just stop. And this thing, I get a spiritual slapping. And I'm like, okay. And then I just let something in. And then all of a sudden, bang, my heart would open. And there was this weird, like crazy, blissful, light, fluffy blessing and warm coziness that would move through my heart as soon as I did that. So the ability of the mind to crush your pleasure in life is astounding. That's why people go towards substances to poison their mind. Right? They want to kill it, and then they get this high. But that high actually already exists within you once you master yourself, once you stop living just purely in the mind, or exclusively, that is. Yeah.
You offer healing sessions in your services. Could you just briefly discuss what a session would be like?
Well, it's kind of like what we just did right now. We just talk about what is the major obstacle a person has mentally, emotionally, or physically. Sometimes it's just what we said. Like sometimes people are falsely assuming that a situation they're in is perfect, and that they shouldn't have these feelings or not. And they're getting gaslit all over the place. And sometimes they'll say, well, listen, this does seem based on your own constitution or your own beingness. It seems like this situation could change, and it might be for your benefit, right? Oh, and other times it could be just helping people break misconceptions about themselves, so that way they can get to know their internal wisdom and find out what is the right decision they should make for themselves. Because in the end, nobody can make your decision for you. It has to do with, like I said before, everything has to do with your own elevation of consciousness. It has to do with your own enlightenment process. So sometimes the biggest dramas in your life are about helping you find freedom within, and then therefore an expression of your freedom. And then that may mean that you leave a situation, or sometimes it may help you elevate that situation. But either way, freedom is the paradigm through which you sit. So I help people find their way into a deeper level of freedom. That's what I do. And I know it's very ambiguous. I'm not a good salesperson when it comes to this stuff, because it's just like, if I do
I
a
don't know,
session,
man. I think this has been a pretty good sales pitch personally, but yeah.
in the end, like just pray that you never get to know me personally. I think you could take it, actually. Honestly, I think you could take it. I really, like, there's something I can resonate. I really can see that you would be, you're a real truth seeker. You're willing to die for truth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
most people aren't willing to die for truth, but when you're at that stage, that means you're going to go all the way. It's going to be challenging along the way here and there, but ultimately it'll always lead you to a freer, more Garden of Eden type of experience. And it's an incredible blessing if you have the ability or the specific talent to say, I'll die for truth, I'll die for God, I'll die for the universe, whatever. That is the most powerful path. If you can do that, there's no obstacle that will be too great for you, which is why you chanted the Ganesha mantra, which is basically remover of obstacles, right? So yeah, in the end, I do sessions to help people. I don't do a lot of them, but here and there, yeah, somebody will come and say, listen, I'm just stuck at this one part. Like, I'm chanting this mantra and this is coming up. Like, is this really something I should take seriously? Or is this something that's just another cleanse? Like, what do I do with this? And through the blending of my energy with them, not on purpose, like I'm not, like the invasion of the body snatchers. It's not like that. But like we have Wi-Fi. This is how we're talking. So every person emanates something. So through just connection with a person or a teacher that is realized a certain level, what happens is that some of that level becomes a benefit to the student in that moment and helps them find a deeper level of freedom. So that's the beautiful thing about guru, teacher. It's not about a guru, because guru in Sanskrit means dispeller of darkness. It doesn't mean expert in information. That's the big thing. I made a mistake with. Like, when people said guru to me a long time ago, like, oh, that person just thinks they know everything. What a
Right,
jerk.
yeah.
That's the first thing, what kind of word. But then I learned, oh, in Sanskrit, it means dispeller of darkness, which is meaning, the darkness that you've created within yourself that has created this cave of suffering. They dispel that so you can walk out of the cave. So you can be a part of the whole universe, like that you can start experiencing the freedom of your life, right? And so that's all guru means. And a real guru will basically help you find freedom from everything, including them. And if you come back to them, it's because there's a love that you're there with, but it's not because they're constraining you or forcing you to be stuck in a belief system or fanatical thinking that keeps you stuck, like a cult or something.
Right.
So that's it, So yeah, so it's a free form thing. And then my workout channel, Natural Blind Bodybuilding, I just teach people how to apply the same type of techniques to their training, because I find a lot of people they get stuck in this fanatical thinking where they just torture themselves in the basement dungeon gym and say, I should be this or should be that. And then they ignore like simple things like how their body should move as opposed to how it naturally moves for them, Yeah.
Well, so your bodybuilding services somewhat overlap with your
it's majorly overlapping, because actually years ago, I don't know how much of my workout videos you watch. It's more stupid humor stuff and everything. And
no, yeah, I've watched a few of them. I enjoy them.
It probably works more against my business than anything, because people go, this guy's he's an idiot. Like, but when I have fun, so who cares? So anyway, what happens is that when I first stepped on YouTube, I thought, oh, I was a national champion. I was a pro in natural bodybuilding. I was on the cover of magazines. I was famous and all that. People will listen to what I have to say when it comes to simple things, when it comes to weight training, at least my suggestions, right? And boy, was I wrong. People got on there and they had their Google out. And they're like, no, you're doing everything wrong. You did everything wrong, even though you wanted. So I realized, wow, there's this massive fanatical thinking that's stuck in the physicality where people are taking things and becoming like religious zealots around lifting weights and around what their body, what they should eat, how they should exercise, like everything to do with the body. They're so identified, instead of actually realizing the law of individuality, where each body has its own individual expression, which needs certain tweaking. And if you just try to do whatever somebody else is doing, you might actually hurt yourself instead of help yourself, So this is really the enlightenment path, is about embracing the truest you, the authentic you, which has nothing to do with idealism or fitting into a template. It has to do with thy shall be done, like what is just naturally moving through you is what naturally moves through you, but it has nothing to do with your mind making it happen. You ever try to make yourself love somebody?
Yeah, actually, yeah.
It doesn't work very good,
No, yeah, it does.
Love is a naturally occurring thing when you allow, and then there can be emotional love, and then there's the universal, like whatever, that's a different discussion. But the bottom line is that an authentic movement of a feeling or a sensation is much more real than you trying to make it or fabricate it like a photocopier machine. Oh, that's love. Okay, a Valentine. Just photocopy the Valentine. This is the same thing. It's like, no, it's not the same thing. That's like artificial intelligence love, right? Yeah,
Right.
you don't want that.